Hello class, today we're going to be looking at 11.4. Now, if you do look in the textbook, you might see that we have skipped a couple lessons, and that's okay. Due to everything going on, we're trying to cut down the material and give you what you need to be successful next year in your next math class and for the SAT. So some of the topics we have skipped, and we're okay with that. We're just trying to keep it short and simple and something that you can do at home. So today we're going to look at two-way tables. Now, two-way tables are really good if you're given a survey. Now, you don't necessarily have to have a survey, but two-way tables are used when you have different categories. So if you don't have other categories, like if we were to look at yesterday's lesson, if we were to be given, or not yesterday's, box and whisker, if we were to be given a set of data like this, it would be really difficult to make a two-way table. Like, what would we put in the different headings? So two-way tables, again, are used a lot with surveys. So some vocabulary words that you need to know. Again, they're not going to ask you to define these, but sometimes they pop up in the directions of a problem. So whenever you hear the word joint frequency are the numbers on the inside. So these would be your joint frequencies. Okay, so I like to kind of say inside numbers. Marginal frequencies are the ones at the ends, or like the totals. So if we were to add 55 and 22, we would get 77. That must mean that there were 77 freshmen surveyed, okay? So these are your outside numbers. But sometimes when you see a box like this, it's kind of like, well, what is inside and outside? So I like to also call these the totals. So it would be these total categories, okay? Those would be your marginal. And honestly, a lot of times, if you're given a problem like the one you see down here, you just fill in the blanks. You don't have to really worry too much about the vocabulary words. So now numbers 4 and 5 that you see here, notice you see the joint and the marginal again, but you see this new word relative. Whenever you see the word relative, they want you to give it as a percent. So what you would need to do is you would have to take the total. So let's quick add these together. So in this survey, there was 152 people surveyed. If they are asking me for the joint relative, what I would have to do is I would have to go 55 divided by the total, and then that gives me a percent of like 36%. And then I would go around and I would fill in every total. If you're asking me for the marginal relative frequency, then I take the outside numbers. So I would take the 77 divided by the total. And notice that's about 51%. And you're going to see another example of this in just a minute. So you always want to take the number divided by the total. And then just remember that when you get your number, like let's say it comes out to be 0.36, remember you just have to move that over to get it into a percent, okay? So whenever you see that word relative, just pay attention to that. So there's a couple of problems, and we don't have to necessarily go through them all because I'm trying to keep this video fairly short, but I want you to be aware of the style so that when you get to your homework, you don't get confused. So notice on this one, they just want you to fill in the two-way table. So they want you to fill in the 2 joint frequencies and the 3 marginal. You really just have to pick away. It's kind of like a little puzzle. I kind of like them. If we go across, and this is not the only way to start, but this is just one way. If you notice, these 2 boxes must add together to get the 118. So I would just subtract, and I would get my other number right here, 54. Now, the bad thing with this type problem is if you mess up this box, chances are you're probably going to mess up the one going down. So you got to be really careful on these numbers, but we could go over here and do these numbers without needing this one. So once you kind of get started, you just have to kind of decide which vertical column or which row you want to go with. So I'm going to do this one. So I'm going to go 286 minus the 118, and I get 168. I'm going to quick add those together. If you don't want to subtract in your head, again, you can just use the calculator. So we've got 168. I'm going for this box right here. So 168 minus the 93 is going to give me the 75. Now, again, the bad thing is if I messed up this number, I'm going to mess this one up. And now I can get this box with either these two or these two. It's kind of up to you. You just have to make sure these two you would add together. These two you would have subtracted. So you just have to be careful which way you're going if you're adding or subtracting, but notice it doesn't matter because I get the same answer. So that's just kind of like a little fill in the blank puzzle. Now, this problem is probably the hardest one for most kids because you have to make it from scratch. So it says, you conduct a survey that asks 85 students in your school whether they are in a math club or chess club. 35 of the students are in math club, and 20 of those students are also in chess club. 38 of the students are not in math or chess. Organize the results in a two-way table. And again, I wish we were together. I wish I could ask you for your input and things like that, but we're not, okay? So here are my two categories, math and chess. So it doesn't matter which one you put where, you're just going to have to pick. And then this one would be chess club. And again, you just have to decide. It won't make your answer wrong if you have them reversed. And then we have to kind of say like, yes, you're in the club. No, you're not in the club. Okay. So how about we'll say yes is in the club. No. Now we go back and we kind of reread it. So there's nothing wrong with reading a problem more than once. It says you conduct a survey that asks 85 students. So 85 students is your total. That's the total number of people asked. It says 35 of the students are in the math club. So 35 people are in it. Now this 35, we have no idea if they're in both or one. So we need to put the 35 out here because we know they're in the math club. And 20 of those, so 20 of these are also in the chess club. So 20 people are in the math and the chess. So we would put 20 right here. Now it says, now I know I can get this answer, but I'm just trying to finish off the rest of the story problem first. 38 of the students are not in math or chess. So no chess, no math. So if we kind of follow those over, that's 38. And then it says it wants us to organize it in a two-way table and we just need to fill it in. So once again, you just kind of have to work your way around and you just would have to get your missing boxes. So this would be a 15. If I subtract, that would give me 50. Hopefully I didn't mess this number up because if I do this way, 50 minus 38, so if I subtract, that gives me 12. So if I add those together, 20 and 12 would give me 32. And then 15 and 38 would give me what? 53. And if I add those together, yes, I got the 85. Now, it didn't necessarily tell me to give the marginal. Remember, this is your marginal. This is your joint. It didn't necessarily say which one to give or which one not to give, but sometimes I always find it best just to give them both, and then you know you've got like all your bases are covered, okay? All right, just a couple more problems. Number 3. Now, if you notice number 3, it kind of looks done, but there's a key word there. It says calculate the joint and marginal relative. There's that word, relative frequencies. So what they want us to do is essentially just copy this over. So, you know, attend college, yes, no, gender, male, female. I'm just trying to go fast for you here. But now what you have to do is you're going to have to get the percents. So the biggest thing I need first is I need a total. So let me grab a total. So my total is 438. So what I need to do now is I'm going to have to take each one of these boxes and I'm going to have to divide it by the total. And if you notice, I get a decimal and then we'll just change that to a percent. So that would be 22%. And then again, I just kind of work my way around the whole box. And so that would be 30%. Now really, I could just add these together to get my percent over here. okay? But I'll hold off on that for just a second. Let me finish off the inside. All right, now let me add these together. So 22 and 30, that would be 52%. Let me add that together, and that would be 47%. Now, this is partly what I wanted you to see. What happens when you add these together? You don't get 100%, do you? No, you get 99%. Look at all of that stuff that we rounded off. Look at all those decimals. Sometimes kids always ask me, does rounding matter? What do you want us to round to? In many cases, rounding probably doesn't matter. But in this case, it's giving us a little bit of a faulty answer. That's okay. We're not going to sit there and copy all of these decimal places down. So just if this comes out to be 99, that's okay. It's not that big of a deal. If you were a statistician for your job, you might want to be a little bit more accurate. But let me show you the other way you could do it. Watch if we add 98 plus 132. We get 230. That would be our marginal. And if we take 230 divided by our total, 438, notice, look at that, 52.5. So that really should have been a 53. So again, it's not that big of a deal that we're technically not at 100% right here. It's just because of all those crazy decimals if you look back at all those numbers. So I wanted just to point that out. But remember, whenever you see the word relative, you've got to change that into a percent, okay? And then you should also add these together. So that would be 49. And look at, there we go again. Look at those two, 99. So you can kind of see the issue there. All right, and then the last one is probably the one that you see the most on an SAT. Not that the SAT is everything, but you see this a lot. So they're giving you the two-way table, and then they're going to ask you some questions. So let's go through. It says people surveyed on the streets of Chicago. What percent of the people surveyed do not own a car? Well, first of all, what percent of the people surveyed? I need to know how many people were surveyed. So let me get a total. 372 people were surveyed. It says, what percent of the people surveyed do not own a car? So do not own a car, I need to add these together. So if I add those together, that'd be 273 do not own a car. So 273 people do not own a car, because that's both of them together, out of the total number of people surveyed. And then now I just need to divide this out. And so about 73%. And that's what they're looking for. Okay? So I would love it if you would pause it right here and try B and C on your own, and then push play and just check your last two answers, okay? All right, I hope you paused it and I hope you tried them. It says of the females surveyed, so you only can look at the female numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and add the females together. And so that means there was 182 females surveyed. It said what percent own a car? So of the people of the females that own a car, that would be 45 out of 182. Now, do you notice that I'm not dividing by everyone surveyed? It's just the females. So sometimes we call this like a subcategory. So just really, really watch that. Sometimes they try to trick you that way. So I got 24%. Okay, it says what percent of the people who own a car? So the people who own a car would be 99 people own a car were male. So of the people who own a car were male. So I would need to do 54 out of 99. And I would get about 55%. Again, if you can kind of see my calculator there, look at all those decimals that we're rounding off, but that's okay. Remember, this is just an introduction to statistics to try to give you an idea or an understanding. So I hope this helps, and this is going to wrap up our chapter 11.